When I first held her, I was terrified. That tiny pink bundle with eyes barely open, fists clenched like she had already made a decision about the world. I was 24. Her mother was 22. We were barely adults, more like kids playing house. And yet, the moment I saw her, I knew, absolutely knew, I would give my life to protect that girl. We named her Ava. Her mother insisted on it. I didn't argue. I was too overwhelmed by love, fear, and a sense of duty that hit me like a freight train the second I watched her tiny chest rise and fall. From the beginning, I took on everything. Diaper changes at 3 in the morning, bottle feeds when my then-girlfriend was too tired to move, late-night lullabies in a cracked voice that had never held a tune. I wasn't perfect, far from it, but I was present, always. When her mother wanted to go back to school, I picked up more shifts. When she needed space, I took Ava to the park and walked for hours. I was there for the teething, the tantrums, the terrifying midnight fevers. Every scraped knee, every crayon masterpiece, every Halloween costume. And in return, I got the word. That magical, monumental word. She called me Dad like it was the most natural thing in the world. Like there was no doubt.
No asterisk. No Gesetastchen.
She called me Dad, and I lived for it. Years passed. Her mother and I split up when Ava was 4. It was mutual, respectful, and probably overdue. But we both agreed nothing would change for Ava. She would have 2 homes, 2 people who loved her unconditionally. I never missed a weekend, never missed a recital, never missed a parent-teacher conference, even when it meant trading shifts or driving across the city during rush hour. I showed up every single time. She grew, so fast it hurt. One day she was a gap-toothed first grader clinging to my leg. The next she was rolling her eyes at my jokes and borrowing my hoodies. We laughed. We argued. We cried together. I taught her how to ride a bike. I stayed up all night helping her with science projects. I scared off boys with a glare I practiced in the mirror. And through it all, she kept calling me Dad. Until she didn't. It didn't happen all at once. There were signs, in retrospect, moments that felt off. Times when she would go quiet when her mom picked her up. Times when I'd see her scrolling through her phone, whispering to friends. I chalked it up to adolescence. Hormones. The natural pulling away of a child becoming their own person. But there was something else. Something darker. A subtle shift I couldn't put my finger on. Then came the request. From her mother, not from Ava. She said Ava had been asking questions. About her real dad. About why she looked so different from me. I laughed at first. Brushed it off. Then I saw the look in her mother's eyes. This wasn't a joke. She suggested a DNA test. Just to clear the air. Just to be sure. I was stunned. Angry. Hurt. But I agreed. Of course I did. I had nothing to hide. Or so I thought. The results came in on a Tuesday. I remember because I had just finished mowing the lawn and was still sweaty when I opened the envelope. The numbers blurred. My hands shook. Not a match. 0% probability. I read it again. And again. It didn't change. It was undeniable. She wasn't mine. Have you ever had your entire identity shaken in a single second? That was me. Sitting on the porch, gripping a piece of paper that rewrote 15 years of my life. How do you breathe when the word that defines you, Dad, is suddenly stripped away? How do you explain to your heart that biology outranks love? But here's the thing. It doesn't. Let me ask you something. What makes a father? Is it DNA? Is it 9 digits printed on a lab report? Or is it the sleepless nights, the boo-boo kisses, the awkward middle school dances you show up to anyway? Is it the years of being there, of caring, of choosing that child day after day after day? I didn't stop being her dad that day. Couldn't. Because she was still my daughter. No test could change the fact that I had loved her with every cell in my body since the moment I first held her. But she did change. And that's where the real story begins. She became quiet around me, reserved, cautious in a way that broke my heart. She still came for visits, but they felt formal, almost obligatory. Our conversations were shorter, her laughter more guarded. I'd ask if she was okay, and she'd shrug. She never said the word again. Not once. That beautiful, grounding word, dad, had vanished from her vocabulary, at least in my direction. I asked her mother if she'd said anything. She told me Ava was just processing, that it would take time, that maybe it was a phase. But it didn't feel like a phase. Felt like mourning, like I had died in her eyes and been replaced by someone else. Some shadow she didn't know how to speak to. Have you ever lost someone who's still alive? That's what it felt like. One day I caught her staring at a photo we had taken together at the zoo. She was 7, on my shoulders, mouth open wide in mid-laugh, pointing at a giraffe. I was grinning up at her, sunburnt and happy. I asked if she remembered that day. She nodded, didn't say a word, and left the room. It was the silence that hurt most. Not the rejection, not even the awkwardness. It was that she didn't ask me questions. Didn't confront me with the hurt I knew she had. She just withdrew like I was a character in a book she had outgrown. Do you think love has an expiration date? I didn't, but I started to wonder. Because no matter what I did, I couldn't bring her back. Not really. Not the way she was. And every time she walked out my door, it felt like the last. So I did the only thing I knew how to do. I stayed. Even when it hurt. Even when she wouldn't look me in the eyes. Even when I felt like a ghost in my own story. I stayed. Because love, real love, doesn't walk away just because it's not written in your blood. And maybe, just maybe, I hope she would see that. Time didn't fix it. Weeks turned into months, and every visit felt colder than the last. Her hugs became side-armed and brief, her goodbyes just a nod. She stopped calling me to tell me about her day. The text slowed, then stopped. I became a placeholder, a scheduled obligation. Her Sundays with me were like doctor appointments, necessary but dreaded. I tried everything. I booked trips, I cooked her favorite meals, I bought tickets to concerts I thought she'd love. And while she came along, she was never really there. Her eyes were distant, her smiles brief. She thanked me with the politeness of a stranger. It's strange how quickly a home can feel empty even when it's full. Her laughter had once echoed in every corner of my house. Her drawings still clung to the fridge door. Her old stuffed animals lay in a box I could never bring myself to put away. But none of that could bring her back to me. I remember one evening in particular. I had made spaghetti, her childhood favorite, the kind with extra garlic bread and no vegetables. We ate in silence. I asked her about school, her friends, even hinted at the boy I saw her texting once. She gave me one-word answers, scrolling through her phone under the table. I asked her, gently, if she was upset with me. She shrugged, said she wasn't. But the distance between us felt like a canyon I could never cross. That night, after she went to bed, I sat in the living room staring at the photo albums we used to look through together. Our camping trip in the Rockies. Her first lost tooth. The day she learned to swim. Memories so vibrant then, now dulled by the ache of absence. I cried. A grown man, crying into a beer with the TV playing some sitcom laugh track in the background. I cried because I didn't know how to fight for her when she didn't want to be fought for. I cried because I had no road map for this kind of grief. How do you hold on to someone who's letting go of you? One night I couldn't take it anymore. I drove over to her mom's house, something I hadn't done in years unless it was a pickup or drop-off. Her mother opened the door and looked surprised, then concerned. We talked. Honestly, maybe for the first time in years. She told me Ava had been talking to her biological father. Apparently, he had reached out months ago. She hadn't known whether to tell me, didn't want to stir the pot, as she put it. But now that things were how they were, she thought I should know. He wanted to meet Ava, had already messaged her. They'd been chatting for weeks. Felt like the final blow. A man who had vanished before she was even born, now suddenly ready to step in, to claim her, and she wanted that. After everything, I didn't sleep that night. I stared at the ceiling, heart pounding, mind racing. What could he offer her that I hadn't? Blood? A face that mirrored hers? A void that she thought he could fill? I didn't blame her, not really. She had questions I couldn't answer. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being replaced. When she came over the next weekend, I asked her. Carefully, gently. She didn't deny it. said she was curious, said it didn't mean she didn't care about me. But the way she said it, with that careful, practiced detachment, cut deeper than any outburst could have. She was slipping away, and I didn't know how to stop it. I wanted to yell, to scream, to ask her how she could forget everything we had built together. But I didn't, because love isn't a transaction. You don't earn it with years and expect a guaranteed return. I had to let her find her answers, even if it meant watching her walk into someone else's arms. And so I did what I had always done. I stayed. I waited. I didn't stop setting a place for her at dinner. I didn't stop texting her good morning. I didn't stop hoping she'd remember. Not just who I was to her, but who she was to me. Because being a dad isn't about being chosen. It's about choosing, over and over, even when they don't choose you back. And maybe, just maybe, one day she would look back and realize that. Months turned into a year, then another. I adapted to the silence like a man living next to train tracks who eventually stops hearing the whistle. Ava grew, and so did the space between us. Her visits became less frequent. Birthdays turned into texts. Holidays were shared with obligation, not excitement. But I kept the door open. I kept her room the same. I paid for her phone. I sent care packages when she got accepted into college, even though she didn't tell me herself. Her mother passed along the news. I didn't let that stop me. I sent a card, a hoodie from her new school, a keychain that said, "Love, Dad." I had to believe that even if she didn't say the word anymore, it still meant something to her. Sometimes I wondered if it would have been easier if I had never known the truth, if the test had never happened. But life doesn't work that way. You can't unknow what you've seen. And Ava couldn't unfeel the fracture it caused. Her mother told me she was meeting him, the biological father. She tried to say it neutrally, like she was reporting the weather. But I could hear the caution in her voice, the sympathy. She knew how hard I'd take it. And I did. I broke down in my garage, surrounded by tools I no longer used and bikes she had outgrown. I kept thinking, did I do something wrong? Was I too much? Not enough? Did she ever really see me as her father? Or had I just been filling a vacancy until the real man showed up? I remembered a quote I once read, "A father is not the man who gives life, but the one who teaches how to live." I had held on to that like a shield, but the shield cracked. She didn't mention the meeting to me, not before, not after, but I knew it happened, and I knew something inside her shifted again, because a few weeks later, she texted me. It was a short message, just a simple, "Hey, can we talk sometime?" I stared at that message for almost an hour. I didn't even realize I was crying until a tear dropped onto my phone screen. I wrote back, "Anytime." She came by the house the next day. She looked older, more mature, but also nervous. Her eyes darted around like she wasn't sure she was in the right place. I offered her a drink. She asked for tea. She never used to like tea. We sat at the kitchen table, the same one where she used to do homework, color outside the lines, and eat pancakes shaped like animals. She didn't say much at first, just looked at her hands. Finally, she asked me why I never stopped trying. I told her the truth. Because I loved her. Because she was mine no matter what a piece of paper said. Because being her father wasn't something I turned off when things got hard. She nodded slowly, said she had seen him, talked to him, even met some of his family. She said it answered questions she didn't know she had. Gave her a sense of place, of clarity. But it didn't feel like home. Then she said something I'll never forget. She said, "He's my father by blood, but you're my dad." I wanted to jump across the table and hold her, but I didn't. I let her sit with it. I let her speak, because this was her journey, and I was just grateful to be invited back into it. She stayed for dinner. We laughed, a little awkward at first, but then genuinely. We washed dishes side by side. She lingered before leaving, hugged me, not a side hug, but the kind that says something real. As she walked out the door, she turned back and said, "Love you, Dad." It was the first time I'd heard her say it in almost 3 years. And in that moment, it was enough to stitch every wound in my chest back together. Sometimes, the people we love need to walk away to understand where they truly belong. Sometimes, The bond isn't broken. It's just buried under layers of doubt and discovery. And when it resurfaces, it's stronger. That's the kind of love I chose. And I'd choose it again, even if I knew how much it would hurt. Because in the end, she came back. And sometimes that's the only miracle we need. Ava started visiting again. Not every week, not even every month, but it was something. A text here, call there, small things. But after so long in the dark, even a flicker felt like a sunrise. One day, she asked me to help her move into a new apartment near her college. I said yes before she finished the sentence. I rented a truck, drove 2 hours out, and spent the whole day hauling boxes up 3 flights of stairs. My back ached for a week, but I didn't complain. I would have carried those boxes across the state if it meant being near her. We unpacked her books, her posters, her kitchen gadgets she didn't really know how to use yet. I watched her laugh with her new roommate, talk about classes and internships. I realized I was watching her become a woman, one who was building her own life, her own world. And I was still part of it. Maybe not in the same way I had been when she was 5 and needed me to tie her shoes, but I was there. Before I left, she hugged me again. Not rushed, not stiff, real. She told me to drive safe, and when I got home, I had a message waiting. Thanks again, Dad. Couldn't have done it without you. That message lived in my inbox for months. I read it on the hard days. I read it when I missed her. I read it when I needed to remind myself that love, when true, doesn't vanish. It just sometimes takes the long way back. But healing isn't always linear. We had good moments, yes, but there were still tough ones. Moments when she'd cancel plans last minute. When she'd forget to call on my birthday. Times when I'd wonder if I was reading too much into every gesture, every smile. Was she really coming back to me? Or was I just holding on to scraps? One night, I got a call from her. She was crying. I could barely make out her words, but I knew she was scared. Something about school, pressure, feeling like a failure. I told her to breathe. I stayed on the phone with her for an hour, maybe more, just listening, reassuring, being her anchor like I always tried to be. When she calmed down, she whispered something that stopped me cold. I called you because I didn't know who else to call. Not her boyfriend, not her friends, not even her biological father. Me. That night, I sat on the couch long after we'd hung up, holding the phone like it was a lifeline, because for a moment it was, and in that moment, I knew something had shifted again, not back to what we were, but toward something new, something real. I started visiting her campus more often. We had coffee. We talked about her goals. She told me she wanted to work in social justice, maybe go to law school. I listened, amazed, not because I didn't believe in her, but because I had forgotten how much she inspired me. She didn't say it every time, but sometimes when the moment felt right, she'd call me Dad. And every single time, it was like hearing it for the first time all over again. If you're still listening and wondering whether love like this can survive betrayal, confusion, and absence, let me tell you, it can. It won't be neat. It won't be easy. But if the foundation is real, it will hold. I once thought that DNA was the unshakable truth. But now I understand. The real truth is in the years. In the scraped knees and the bedtime stories. In the patient waiting and the quiet presence. The truth is in choosing them, even when they don't know how to choose you back yet. And if they return, like Ava did, you realize you were never just filling a role. You were building something that lasts longer than blood ever could. The next real turning point came when Ava invited me to her graduation. I was already planning to attend. I wouldn't have missed it for the world. But the fact that she reached out first, with her own words, meant more than I could explain. It was a sunny spring day, one of those where the light makes everything feel hopeful. I arrived early and sat among rows of proud parents, trying not to cry just reading the program. Her name was printed there, right next to a little asterisk for honors. Honors. My heart could barely hold it. When she walked across that stage, head held high, I felt everything at once. Pride, relief, grief, joy. It all collided inside me like a crashing wave. I clapped until my hands stung. She glanced in my direction, gave the smallest smile, and that was it. I was done. Tears streamed down my face, and I didn't care who saw. After the ceremony, I found her in the crowd. She ran to me, actually ran, threw her arms around my neck like she hadn't been holding back all those years. In that embrace, the distance vanished. All the cold visits, the awkward silences, they melted. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything." We took photos together, laughed with her friends, talked about what was next. She introduced me as her dad. Not her stepdad. Not her sort of dad. Just dad. Weeks later, I got an invitation to a family dinner at her new apartment. She wanted me to meet some friends, maybe even her boyfriend. I said yes, heart thumping like it was my first date. Her place was modest, filled with plants she tried not to kill, mismatched chairs, and candles that smelled like cinnamon and ambition. She made pasta. The sauce was a little too salty, the garlic bread a little burnt, but it was perfect. Around the table, we joked and talked. She told stories from her childhood, ones I had almost forgotten. She remembered more than I thought, more than she ever let on. When the night wound down, she walked me to my car. The sky was dark, but the street lamp lit her face just enough for me to see that familiar look. The one she had as a child when she needed something but didn't know how to ask. She reached into her bag and pulled out a small wrapped box. Said it was a late Father's Day gift. Inside was a keychain. Simple. Leather. Engraved with 2 words, my dad. That night, I sat in my car for 20 minutes before driving off, holding that keychain in my hand like it was the most precious thing I owned. Because in many ways, it was. See, I think the hardest part about parenting, real parenting, is that there are no guarantees. You love, you give, you show up. But you don't always get what you hope for. Sometimes you lose. Sometimes you wait. And sometimes, miraculously, they come back. And when they do, even if the road has been long and bruised, there is something incredibly sacred about being chosen again. Ava chose me, not because she had to, not because I asked, but because in her heart she knew. Blood may have built the question, but love answered it. She called me dad again, and this time it was forever. Life settled into a rhythm again. Not quite like the old days, but something new, something good. Ava and I weren't constantly in touch, but we didn't need to be. There was trust now, a shared understanding that didn't need to be spoken aloud. She'd call me when something big happened, when she got a new job, when she got sick and wanted soup, when her car broke down and she needed someone who wouldn't judge her for forgetting to change the oil. I was still her go-to. That meant everything. It was one of those late spring mornings when she called and asked if I wanted to join her for a charity 5K. I laughed at first. Me, run? But she said it was for a good cause and that she wanted me there. That was enough. We walked most of it talking about life, about how things used to be. She asked me if I remembered the time we built a treehouse together, even though I was terrible with tools. I told her I remembered every splinter. She laughed and nudged my arm. It was light, easy, natural. I realized then that we had reached a point I never thought possible. Comfort. She asked me what I wanted for my birthday that year. I told her nothing, just to spend time together. Maybe dinner, maybe a drive, anything with her. On my birthday, she surprised me with something better. She took me to a local art gallery, the same one we used to visit when she was little, where she'd stare at sculptures and ask questions way too big for a 10-year-old. This time, she had arranged for us to take a private painting class. We were terrible. Our canvases looked like toddler finger paintings, but we laughed so hard we cried. It wasn't about the painting. It was about making something, together. At the end of the night, as we cleaned our brushes and wiped paint from our hands, she looked at me and said something that left me speechless. "You're the reason I know how to love." I couldn't say anything for a while, just smiled and nodded and swallowed the lump in my throat. Years ago, I thought I had lost her forever. I thought a piece of paper had erased the years, the memories, the bond. But here she was, not only choosing me again, but recognizing what I had given her. And maybe that's the point of it all. Not to be perfect. Not to win their love with gifts or gestures. But to simply be there. Steady. Consistent. Kind. There was never a switch that flipped. Never a dramatic apology or sudden transformation. Just time, patience, quiet resilience. I started to understand that being a dad isn't about one moment. It's about a million little ones. And when those little moments stack high enough, they build something unshakable. Ava and I had built something, not in spite of what happened, but because we chose to keep going. And what we had now was stronger than anything written in blood. Time has a funny way of circling back to old wounds, not to reopen them, but to show how well they've healed. A few years after Ava's graduation, she invited me to something I hadn't expected. A dinner with her biological father. I won't lie, my stomach turned when she asked. I said yes, of course, because it was important to her. But inside, I was a storm of anxiety and doubt. What would I say? What could I possibly offer in a room where biology had once drawn a line I couldn't cross? We met at a quiet restaurant. Just the three of us. Ava sat in the middle like the bridge we had both reached for in different ways. Her biological father was polite, nervous, and as I looked at him, I saw not a rival, but a reflection of the very thing that had once haunted me. Uncertainty. He spoke softly, admitted his absence, didn't make excuses, said he'd spent years wondering, regretting, and now he was trying to make up for lost time. Ava listened, nodded. I listened too. When he excused himself briefly, Ava leaned in and said something I'll never forget. You were never in competition. You were just always there. That was all I needed. The dinner ended with a handshake. It wasn't warm, but it wasn't cold either. Just mutual understanding. An unspoken truth between two men who had loved the same child in very different ways. Later that night, I realized I wasn't afraid of being replaced anymore. I had already been chosen. Not once. Not by accident. But every day, by the way Ava showed up in my life and let me in. Our bond wasn't built on exclusivity. It was built on presence. As the years went by, our roles shifted again. Ava got married. She asked me to walk her down the aisle. Not because she had to, because she wanted to. Her biological father was there too. But I was the one standing beside her when the music started. My hand on hers. My steps in sync with hers. Our moment. And when the officiant asked, "Who gives this woman away?" I said with steady voice and a full heart, "I do." There are moments in life when time folds in on itself. When you feel every year, every hurt, every joy all at once. That was one of them. Ava and I danced at the reception. I held her in my arms and remembered the first time she stood on my shoes to dance in the kitchen. Now she was taller, wiser, radiant, and she was still mine. Later that night, she whispered in my ear, "I hope my kids have a dad like you." I couldn't speak. I just hugged her tighter. Years of pain, doubt, and waiting had led to this. Not the title, not the name, the legacy. And that's something no DNA test can ever take away. Ava's wedding came and went, but the memories stayed. So did the feeling that something sacred had been sealed that day. Not just a vow between her and her husband, but something between her and me. A silent confirmation that I had not only been her father all those years, but that I always would be. Life slowed down after that. The visits weren't as frequent. She had her own family now, her own routine. But there were still texts on Tuesdays, calls on Sundays, and pictures of silly things her dog did that reminded her of our old beagle, Scout. One morning she called and said, "I've got news." I could tell by the crack in her voice that it was big.
I'm pregnant.
I froze, then smiled, then sat down before I fell down. I congratulated her, told her how proud I was. She laughed and said, "You're going to be a grandpa." The word hit me like sunlight through a window. Grandpa. When Ava was born, I had no idea what I was doing. Just a terrified young man with shaking hands and a heart bigger than his chest could hold. And now here I was older, maybe a little wiser, preparing to welcome a new heartbeat into our story. She asked me to be there for the birth, said she couldn't imagine doing it without me. When the day came, I waited in the hallway of that hospital like I had years ago, pacing and praying. Then I heard it, the sharp cry of a new life. My knees went weak. They let me in a few hours later. Ava looked exhausted, glowing, the way only new mothers do. She held a tiny baby girl in her arms, swaddled in pink, with the softest wisps of hair I'd ever seen. She said, "This is Eliza." And then she handed her to me. Holding Eliza was like coming full circle. I looked into her eyes and saw Ava. I saw all the years, all the hurt, all the healing, and the love that outlasted all of it. I whispered, "Welcome to the world, little one. You're already loved more than you'll ever know." Ava watched me and smiled through tears. "You were always the dad I needed. I hope I can be even half the mother you were a father." And just like that, the years didn't matter. The mistakes didn't matter. The blood didn't matter. What mattered was the child in my arms, the woman beside me, and the legacy we were passing down. That night, as I drove home alone, I thought about how easy it would have been to walk away when the test came back. How simple it would have been to say, "She's not mine." But I couldn't, because she was mine, not by blood, but by every choice I ever made to love her, raise her, and never leave. And now, another life had entered this world because I stayed. A new beginning, written from a past that could have broken us but didn't. And that, I think, is the real story. Becoming a grandfather opened a new chapter one never saw coming. It wasn't just a title, it was another chance to give, to guide, and to love without condition. Eliza became the joy of my later years. The first time she gripped my finger with her impossibly small hand, I felt the same overwhelming, almost frightening love I'd once felt for Ava. It was as if time had doubled back and given me another beginning, but this time I knew exactly what to do. I rocked her to sleep with the same lullabies I had once mumbled to Ava. I read her the same storybooks, some with the corners worn from years of turning pages together. When she took her first steps and fell into my arms, I thought, this is what legacy feels like. Ava often watched us, a soft smile on her face, as if witnessing the threads of her own childhood weaving into her daughters. She'd say, "She's obsessed with you," and I'd reply, "It runs in the family." I wasn't trying to replace anything or prove anything anymore. I was just present, there, consistent. One day, Eliza called me Grampy. No one told her to. No one prompted her. It just came out, natural, like she knew. I laughed, Ava cried, and something deep in me finally settled. It was as if all the years of struggle, all the nights I questioned whether staying had been enough, finally answered themselves through the voice of a toddler who saw me as no one else but hers. In those quiet moments, when I'd hold Eliza while she napped or build towers out of blocks only for her to knock them over, I thought about the man I had once been. Scared, confused, angry at fate. And yet I stayed. Sometimes we don't realize that the greatest act of love is not the big gestures, but the refusal to give up. Ava had once walked away, and I had let her go. Not because I didn't love her, but because I did. I gave her space. I gave her time. And in return, she came back, not just to me but to herself. Now, watching her parent Eliza, I see pieces of myself in her. The way she kneels to Eliza's level when she speaks. The patience in her voice. The silly songs she hums during diaper changes. And I realize I didn't just raise a daughter, I helped raise a mother. Eliza will grow up knowing she is safe, she is loved, and she is chosen. Every single day. Just like her mother was. And in this way, love becomes a cycle. A legacy passed down not through blood, but through the quiet strength of being there. Always there. That's what it means to be dad. And now, that's what it means to be Grampy too. Years have passed now, and the seasons feel gentler, slower. Ava is older. I am older. Eliza is growing like a sunflower. Tall, bright, and always reaching for more. Sometimes I sit in my favorite chair by the window, holding a cup of coffee, and I think about the journey we've taken. From the trembling hands of a young man holding his newborn daughter, to the steady hands of a grandfather steadying his granddaughter as she takes her first steps. It hasn't been perfect. It's been painful, confusing, beautiful, real. There were moments I wanted to give up. Moments where the silence from Ava felt like rejection. Where the truth of that DNA test echoed louder than all the bedtime stories I ever read. But I held on, because I believed in what love could do, what showing up could mean. Ava once asked me if I ever regretted it. All those years, all that pain, knowing now that we weren't connected by blood. I told her the truth. Not for a second. Because love is never wasted. Every story read. Every scraped knee kissed. Every holiday meal cooked. Every dance in the living room. All of it mattered. All of it built a life. And now, that life echoes forward through her, and through Eliza. Ava still calls me Dad. Eliza still calls me Grampy. And in those names I hear everything. Every year. Every tear. Every laugh. Every choice to stay. If you're listening to this and wondering if your love is enough, if your presence matters, if what you give without blood ties has value, let me tell you this. It does. It matters more than you know. Because the ones we love, truly love, may forget our gifts or our words, but they will never forget that we were there, that we didn't leave, that we chose them over and over even when they didn't choose us. That's what defines a parent. That's what builds a family. And if I had to do it all over again, with all the heartbreak and all the waiting and all the silence, I would, because she called me Dad. And nothing, absolutely nothing, means more than that. So if you've made it this far, I have to ask you, who in your life needs you to stay? Who are you choosing today? Let me know in the comments below. And if this story touched something in you, share it. Let's remind the world that sometimes the strongest families aren't made by blood. They're made by love. This voice you're hearing is generated by artificial intelligence, which means sometimes it might get things wrong. If you noticed any errors or have thoughts to share, please drop them in the comments so we can make future stories even better.